Welcome to this Freedom Shift webinar. I'm your host, Richard Wells, and today we are going to show you how to counter the real threats to your freedoms and liberties. This is about empowering you to really protect your God-given rights under the Constitution. Now, again, Richard Wells here, but I'm joined by my longtime friends and associates, colleagues in this cause of freedom, if you will, Chris Allen and Dan McLean. Now, combined, we have decades of experience influencing government, and as you can imagine, we've seen things ranging from the outrageous to the alarming, but we've also seen some thrilling victories that give us hope. Now, each of us got involved in this journey for a variety of different reasons, but we all have come to one absolute conclusion. Freedom has to be actively defended by everyday people in order to keep it. Now, while we're giving our guests a couple more minutes to log on here, let me just remind you what you're going to get out of this webinar. First and most importantly, you're going to walk away with the belief and conviction that you have the power to influence the government. Now, it's never been more urgent to use this power to protect our freedoms. And we can't afford to get distracted by the divisiveness that is created to control and manipulate the masses. Now, second, we'll share with you what we've discovered to be best practices when it comes to influencing your elected officials. And we're going to back them up with examples of success, real world examples that actually prove the point. Again, this isn't just theory. We've seen it work, and it can be done by a collective group of people in just minutes a week. And that's really the third one. We're going to show you how leveraging strength in numbers can help you get the job done. And here's the cool thing. It doesn't take as many people as you might think to change the outcome on any given issue. So again, this is about empowering you to really protect and reclaim your inherent rights in just a few minutes a week without having to leave your home or run for office or lose your job or riot in the streets or even get canceled on social media. We're going to talk about being effective. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started now, even though I know there's some people that are still trying to jump on at this point. As I mentioned, this webinar starts with belief. Now, I'm a high school basketball coach. And there's nothing more concerning to me than that look of defeat on my team's face when I call a timeout after our opponent just dropped 10 points on us, went on a 10-point scoring run, and now they're up 20. Now, no matter what play I call or what adjustments we make for that matter, if we don't fix the belief issue, it's game over. So that's number one. Then we're going to show you how to be effective at protecting your God-given rights under the Constitution. And again, this can happen in just minutes a week, and you don't have to run for office unless you feel called to do that. I mean, we certainly need good people going up there to Washington or state governments, local governments. You don't have to risk losing your job because we're going to take the fight to the right people at the right time. Now, before we go any further, let me pause to sincerely congratulate you for investing your time right now into the cause of freedom. I'm honored to be in your company. Now, you're showing up here at this time of crisis for our country tells me that you're already part of the solution. I also want to acknowledge that many of you are angry, frustrated, wondering if there's anything that will actually work. And I get it. I mean, over the last 15 years, since I left a very good corporate career to branch out into this noble but very challenging profession of influencing government by the people, I've been ready to give up more times than I care to admit. I mean, how many times can we take being let down by a candidate or an election or some new policy, the media, or just flat out corruption before we decide to walk away in disgust? Now, I believe what I've experienced has prepared me to deal with the frustration people are feeling today during a real but politicized pandemic and an election that leaves us scratching our heads at best. I also want to acknowledge your valid concerns that maybe we've gone too far as a nation, that there's no way to overcome the erosion of our constitutional rights. This erosion, I guess, is contributing to problems ranging from cancel culture, big tech censorship, media manipulation, political spin, big money influence. I mean, the list of challenges goes on and on. And while those concerns are real, I need to call a timeout right now because I'm looking at that black hole of despair, that look in your eyes that I've seen in my team's eyes on the basketball court. And this timeout is about understanding why we have to fight our way out of this hole. because the how we're going to do it won't matter if our why isn't big enough. Before we dive into the why, remember this: America's foundation is strong. So strong that recent pressure by the people directly and indirectly led to reduced taxes and costly job-killing regulations. The result? Well, before COVID, we were experiencing massive economic growth. Millions of new jobs were created. Manufacturing was coming back to America at record levels. Millions came off food stamps. They started working and paying taxes. Now, it's largely due to the fact that we, the people, demanded free market policies, again, directly and indirectly. Now, again, there's some politicians who want us to go back to failed policies, redistribution of wealth, higher taxes, more regulations, etc. We're not saying don't help your fellow man out. When policies don't work, you got to ask the question, what stops all this craziness? Well, it's an informed citizenry, tough word to say, informed citizenry that are just frustrated enough that they're willing to get involved and then be relentless about that involvement because their why is big enough. Everyone's why is a bit different, but I think we all agree that freedom is priceless. It matters. And resisting the obvious and sometimes subtle attempts to erode it, that's a duty that's born to all freedom-loving people. Now, those who ignore this duty end up facing devastation like those that have experienced the turnover of governments throughout the centuries. I mean, just think of the communist takeover of Russia, China, Hungary, North Korea, North Vietnam, and countless other totalitarian government overtakes that have happened throughout history. One thing I know is we can't let that happen to America, to our children, not on our watch. Now, look, we're talking about American freedom, prosperity. The reason why millions and millions and millions of people have immigrated to this country and continue to do so. We're talking about the ability to travel, the ability to securely save your own money, to own a business, to own property, to distribute that property to your children or charities or whatever way you see fit. FreedomSHIFT is creating a relentless movement of liberty-loving people who defend our rights. It's about giving you the peace of mind that your children and their children will grow up in a free society. We're going to see the threats, stand together, defeat them, so that we can enjoy freedom, prosperity, and the American dream. So your reasons for taking action absolutely matter. So right now, I want you to take a minute, really think about it. Why must you prioritize the fight for freedom? What could you not afford to lose? What will our lack of involvement cost you, but especially what will it cost the next generation? I'm going to take just a second to really think about that. Hopefully ideas, thoughts, images are coming into your mind. Vivid images of why you have to stand up for freedom and our way of life. Now, I want you to hold on to that image as we talk about the how, or in other words, the game plan. Now, let's take a look at how the domino effect applies here. You see, one domino can knock down another domino that's 1.5 times bigger than itself. By placing 31 dominoes in a row, where each one is 1.5 times bigger than the previous one, the 31st domino would be taller than Mount Everest. Now, that's some serious compounding. And here's how this works. You need to picture the first domino. The first domino is you, me. It's the individual. Now, the second domino is really belief, right? Without belief, you won't take action. And that once you have you and belief coupled together, there's enough momentum to knock down the third domino, which is taking effective action. And again, we're not talking about taking a lot of time to do that. And the fourth domino is combining or leveraging strength in numbers. And when you start to put, let's say 1 million, let's think big here, 1 million responsible, concerned citizens all hitting that fourth and that fifth domino together, that's going to create some serious force. It's going to create momentum. Now, we the people greatly outweigh the bureaucrats, the politicians, and so forth in government. Now, I'm just going to tell you right up front, this will take focused effort, and you're going to need some help doing it. You're going to need encouragement. And what I've found is that a coach can make all the difference in somebody succeeding in a goal or not. So I want to introduce you to your freedom coaches in this webinar today. Our first coach, Mr. Dan McLean. And I've watched Dan's faith, his focus over the last 15 years in this work. I'm just going to tell you this. He's been an inspiration to me, a key part of my ability to stay engaged in this fight. So here's Dan.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with this freedom-loving audience from all over the country. I feel like I'm in good company. From early on, I guess the best way to describe my background is I'm a serial entrepreneur. In fact, I had my first business when I was in my early teens. Back then, though, I didn't consciously think about this, about how freedom was the very reason that I had opportunities. I definitely didn't connect the dots with how much the government could interfere with my business. And even though I didn't like paying taxes, I thought, oh, well, it is what it is. Let the government do their thing and I'll do mine. But reality began to set in. It creeped in on me day by day until finally it hit me like a ton of bricks. My father, who had worked in a particular profession for years, was with one stroke of the pen legislated out of business. And I'll tell you, the people he helped didn't have many options after that either. But it made me realize that whether you're in business or not, you have to be involved in the legislative process. So for years now, I've talked with people all over the country and I've heard their heart, not at a distance, but face to face. Some have said to me, felt the same way that I did early on. And some have said, I'm not into politics. Well, here's a rude awakening. Government finds its way into you because government grows on the liberties we give up. It'll find its way, intrusive government can find its way into every endeavor you attempt to be involved in. And we know freedoms are at stake, and it's not just about how that affects our finances. It's about other important freedoms as well. How about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms? You know, those freedoms don't exist in a vacuum. They're in fact preserved and protected, or they're gradually eroded. We're seeing this happen more and more in recent years. So I wanted to know, what can I do about it? Is the power in the Constitution really in we, the people? No, I mean, really. Let me give you some good news. I've seen this power demonstrated up close and personal. Now, we're not kidding anybody. We're in the battle of a lifetime. But in meeting with and mobilizing hundreds of thousands of people nationwide, directly or indirectly, I've seen firsthand the impact that informed, involved citizens can have on critical legislation. Now, the question has always been, how do you do that? I mean, how do you put people in the position to make a difference? Well, I discovered there's two sides to this coin. There's the practical side, and then there's the passionate side. Let me explain. The practical side is to provide busy people with tools so that in 10 minutes a week, can you make that sacrifice for freedom's sake? 10 minutes, or you can take as much time as you want, but 10 minutes a week, you can have a relentless voice in pressuring your elected officials on critical legislation. Now, accurate information is vitally important. Somebody said an informed and freedom-loving people can never be enslaved, but the problem we have, and have you noticed, is there's a lot of misinformation out there. So we knew people had to be empowered with the facts, not the spin on these critical pieces of legislation that affect our freedoms. Now, the people we reach every day, they live in the real world. They understand the concept of individual responsibility. I mean, how old school is that? And they have freedom as a true North principle. They don't have to be told how to vote. They just need the facts. And then for this to work, they need the tools. So even though they're busy, they can pressure their elected officials on the very issues that affect their finances and freedoms. Now, let's face it, Congress needs to be reminded about who they actually work for. Now, that's the practical side. Combine that with the passionate side. Now, what I mean by that is the real belief, the real conviction that it makes a difference. Talking with as many people as I have from all over the country, I've heard all the excuses for not being involved, but not one legitimate reason. I've heard the problem is too big, Congress doesn't listen, what can I do? And besides that, I'm too busy. But here's the truth. Informed, involved people have the power. Uninformed, uninvolved, not so much. But not only do we have the power, we have the responsibility. Apathy for any reason is unacceptable if we're to remain free. Now, any generation that takes freedom for granted will be apologizing to the next generation for freedoms lost. You know, whenever I'm looking to discover truth or verify that what I'm thinking is true, I look to the Bible. Jesus taught a powerful principle about how faith, this heart level conviction and belief, overcomes the stiffest resistance. You've probably heard about the story of the widow woman who was being harassed by someone trying to take advantage of her. She found herself before a corrupt judge that could care less about justice. He was without compassion or conscience, and he ruled by self-interest. You know, she had the facts, but have you noticed facts don't matter when corruption is involved? We've seen this very thing play out in some of the courtrooms all across America. Now, here's the lesson, though, we can learn from this seemingly weak widow. She leveraged her only advantage, and it was powerful. She wouldn't stop. She was relentless. The judge finally ruled in her favor, not because he cared about justice, but because she harassed him into making the right decision. I've discovered that some politicians just won't do the right thing for the right reasons. Imagine that. But they are motivated to keep their jobs. And Richard, I guess the best way to sum this up is the spirit of this Freedom Shift community is all about conviction. You get involved because it's the right thing. You stay involved. You share it with others until you're part of a relentless force for good, for God, and for freedom.
Well, thanks, Dan. There is nothing like a rude awakening to throw you into the fight for freedom. But when you add real-world examples like the widow's story, you get the kind of conviction that Dan has to really get into the fight, no matter the odds, and be relentless about it when freedom is on the line. Now, that's the kind of coach that Dan is, that he's been to me. And now let me introduce you to my first coach in this freedom fight, Mr. Chris Allen.
Well, thanks, Richard. You know, it's been a 30-year journey into the belly of the beast for me. Just like many people do, I fell into my first career. No real plan. I just needed to make a living, take care of my family. And in my early 20s, I had no interest in politics. But as luck would have it, my first serious sales position was with the most powerful business lobby in the country. I was calling on small business owners who were sharing their horror stories of how government regulations, taxation, and government overreach into their businesses was impacting their lives, their families, in ways that I couldn't have even imagined at the time. Now, we were fighting to protect and preserve these business owners by taking their case directly to Washington. You see, I really didn't realize it at the time, but I was now a part of the 34,000 lobbyists and special interest groups, all trying hard to influence our elected officials. And I quickly learned, if you want to win at this game, you have to be an ends justify the means person. I mean, I believed in the cause of protecting America's small business owners. I still do to this day. However, I started to see the backroom deals, the influence peddling, and the corruption that was rampant in the lobbying industry. And once I saw how the sausage was being made in Washington, as they say, well, let's just say I lost my appetite for sausage quick. So I jumped head first into American history. Specifically, I read the founding documents, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights. And what I learned changed me forever. Our sacred liberty was under attack, and we, the people, were the only ones empowered by the Constitution to restore, preserve, and when necessary, reclaim it. For the next 20 years, I've dedicated my life to waking people up to the truth. The truth that in America, we have the power. We're the only ones that can hire and fire every elected official, local, state, all the way up to the federal government. And when we leverage that power, freedom and liberty are protected. Unfortunately, most Americans don't believe they have that power. Think about it. Think of the people you know. So many people have lost faith. And you know what? They do nothing. I learned that this is exactly what the power brokers, the big money influencers, and the corrupt politicians want us all to believe. Because as long as we do, they win and we lose. The simple truth is this: your voice is more powerful than you think. And when we combine your voice with a groundswell of other responsible Americans nationwide, speaking up on the same issues at the same time, they will listen. How do I know? Because they want to keep their job. That's how we get accountability in Washington. There is no other way. We've got to wake up, unite, and hold them accountable. And that's exactly what we're doing here at Freedom Shift.
Man, I love how Chris's experience shows us the danger of apathy. Now, you might be an entrepreneur and relate to Dan's story about being kicked around by the government and then watching a family business disappear because of legislation and realize, hey, it's in my own best interest to get involved here. You might be like Chris, who had a young family and he took a job with a lobby to provide for that family, and he got an education that he never imagined. I mean, as good as protecting small business was, he saw them fighting with 34,000 plus lobbies who will do just about anything to get their niche issue passed. Now, forget about the darker side of those backroom deals. Those special interest groups are bound to conflict with the freedom and prosperity of individuals at some point. Now, you might also be like me. I was moving up the corporate ladder, young family, and I realized that they expected me, to give up some of my beliefs and convictions when I walked through the door. Now, that was one thing for me, but the real moment of truth that threw me into this world of protecting our freedoms by the people about 16 years ago, really, was when I was driving home from work one day, listening to a news story that highlighted a teacher in public school indoctrinating her students on a worldview that public funds had no business supporting. I was outraged that my tax dollars were paying teachers to teach things contrary to my values and what I believed were the fundamentals of a free society. So I decided to leave my career. And like Dan and Chris, I started encouraging people face-to-face to get informed and take effective action. I got serious about understanding the roots of American freedom. I read, I studied, I took constitutional studies courses, I taught them, I became a state delegate in my political party, and I successfully helped remove entrenched incumbents to get better candidates on the ballot. Now, I've influenced enough people to speak up on issues and seen it directly stop or change bad policy in government. In other words, instead of believing the critics that there's nothing an average person can do, I ran my own test. I experimented. You know what? I saw that it actually worked, even though most people told me that I was nuts and proclaimed my efforts fruitless, hopeless, even naive. I've been called all kinds of things, every name in the book, by people who just really wanted an excuse why they shouldn't get involved themselves or why they didn't want to get involved themselves. You see, I learned that negative political agendas advance in an environment where we, the people, become apathetic. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When I hear people shout, hey man, there's nothing we can do about it. Well, as long as they believe that, they'll do nothing. There's something you could do about the challenges we're facing. And I choose to believe I can change things for the better, and I act accordingly. So if you've ever felt like Dan or Chris or myself, hey, you're not alone. If you felt hopeless or powerless, we have too. But if you, like us, believe American ideals are worth fighting for, then you've come to the right place. So now that you know a little bit about our background, let's dive into the 3 keys to protecting and reclaiming our God-given rights. Now, Chris is going to cover key number 1. The power of this government is in the people themselves.
Well, thanks, Richard. Well, at the risk of repeating ourselves here, I want you to think for a minute. How many people do you know who really believe that they have real power to influence their elected officials? Can you count them on one hand, maybe one finger? Do you think that's by accident? Of course it's not. Let me tell it to you straight. Believing that lie is exactly what they're counting on. You see, you believe that and you do nothing. We must always remember that in America, we have the power. Democracy is a participatory sport. So if you're sitting on the sidelines, you're not in the game. Our founders said it this way: we don't have a government by the majority. We have a government by the majority who participate. Now, let me share with you a story that illustrates this principle. Before the Declaration of Independence was inked, the American colonists were British subjects. They were subject to the king's rule. King George and the British Empire had the power and control over every aspect of their lives. And then something happened. A few brave souls decided that they'd had enough of the corrupt British rule and decided that freedom was worth fighting for, even dying for. Brave men like George Washington, Thomas Paine, Patrick Henry, Sam Adams, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin, just to name a few, began a movement to stand up to King George and ultimately sealed their fate and ours with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Can you imagine what they were up against? First of all, a third of the people in the colonies were siding with the British monarchy. They were just fine living under tyranny. Then there was another third who supported the cause as long as they didn't have to get their hands dirty. They didn't want to sacrifice anything. They wanted to sit on the sidelines and then see how this thing turned out. Well, thank the heavens, there was another third of the people who were willing to sacrifice their money, their lands, their sacred honor, and even their very lives, if necessary, to fight for their freedom and independence. This was truly one of the most epic David and Goliath matchups in all of history. The American colonists went up against the greatest superpower in the world. So how did they defeat the British Army? Simple. The British Army was fighting for a paycheck, while the American colonists were fighting for their freedom, liberty, and independence. We must never forget, it's in every bureaucrat's best interest to expand their power. For example, the head of the EPA will always seek a bigger budget, more power to enforce their rules and regulations. Politicians, lobbyists, and big tech will do the same to push their agendas against the will of the people. Our founding fathers were very clear that we would no longer be subjects, but rather we, the people, would reign as the sovereigns of this nation. Government would be our servant. That's what it means to be an American citizen instead of a British subject. Now, here's the good news. We still have this power granted to each of us under the Constitution. We only need to wake up and use it. No excuses. Now, Sam Adams put it this way. He said it doesn't take a majority to prevail, but rather a small, irate, tireless minority. That right there, that's what this webinar is all about.
Okay, we've really hammered key number one. We, the people, have the power. We've done this because it is the foundation to this plan. With that firm footing, we can dive into key number two and learn how to use that power by taking effective action in simple, consistent increments. And that's often what's referred to as the compound effect. The compound effect is perhaps the biggest secret to successful outcomes in any endeavor, and it absolutely applies to preserving our freedoms. Let me illustrate with a story. And I actually heard this story from a business owner I was visiting with while doing legislative research. As I was sharing a report with her about how, people, we the people speaking up had actually influenced recent legislation, she got kind of negative. She cut me off right in the middle of, even though I was giving her some really powerful examples. And it really surprised me when in despair, she said, "Richard, that's nice, but it's insignificant. Compared to America's biggest problems, it's just a drop in the bucket." Now, I listened to her complain and vent for a minute, but then I stopped her and I said, "Look, we know the problems in America. The question isn't, do we have problems? So what are we going to do about them? Are we going to stand up or are we going to give up?" Now, to her credit, she immediately stopped and she said, "Richard, you're right. Small victories add up over time, and we do have to take this one step at a time." She then inspired me with a story of her own, a story about how she learned the principle of the compound effect. Now, she didn't call it the compound effect, but here's the story she shared with me. It's powerful. When she was in junior high, she got a hall pass one day and she rounded the corner. She noticed the janitor was picking up some pennies out of a dirt pile. Now, this business owner, she's a pretty blunt person, so I wasn't surprised as she continued to tell me how this story unfolded. I could picture a little version of herself standing there, hands on hips, staring at this janitor in disbelief. She said that's exactly what she did. And she finally exclaimed, kind of rudely, she said, "What are you doing?" Well, he replied to her very calmly, "Picking up the spare change that you students throw on the floor." Now, as a side note, she said that the students, they kind of had a habit, a lot of them would just drop their spare change on the floor after they bought their school lunch, a handful of pennies, maybe a nickel or two. And she said you could see them on the floor around the lunchroom and then the halls around the lunchroom after school. So there she was, standing hands on hips, looking in disbelief at this man. And then she replied, "Well, yeah, I can see that they're picking up pennies, but they're just pennies. Why bother?" He stopped, looked at her for a moment, and said, "Young lady, the change you students so carelessly discard, every day I've collected for years, and I've used that money at the end of each month to pay a little extra principal on my mortgage for my house." Then he looked at her and said, "That little bit of extra each month has made me a free man. I own my house outright and a lot sooner than I would have otherwise." Now, the janitor teaches us that little behaviors compounded over time add up to big results. Now imagine what 1 million people sending a small message to our elected officials on a critical issue just once a month when the issue's happening. Do you think it influenced the way they act? Well, we have evidence that it does. I mean, I guarantee you, if 1 million people told them to pull all the pet projects out of a spending bill, things that were unrelated to that bill, do you think they'd do it? If their jobs were threatened, I guarantee you that they would. And we've seen it happen with far fewer people calling or writing into their office. But the consistency over time is what will protect our liberty. The fact that they know responsible, concerned people are watching them. And again, we've seen hundreds of letters change an issue, and we're going to give you an example of that in just a minute. So here's step number 1 in taking effective action. Don't try to eat the proverbial elephant all in one bite. Do just a little bit, make it a habit, do it regularly to protect your freedom. For example, take a few minutes sometime during the week when you're notified or when you become aware of an issue. It could be once a month. I mean, once a month is more than most people ever do in a lifetime, which is they'll never even write once in a lifetime. So you're going to send a message to your elected officials about a topic of that month or a week. And if there isn't a big topic, we'll use that time to learn about the principles of a free society. So that's step number 1. Don't try to do it all at once. Do something small, but do it regularly. Step number 2, don't get bogged down in all the tabloid media, the one-sided editorialism. I mean, the doom and gloom artists make a living off of whipping up the masses into a frenzy. So don't get overwhelmed by those who tell you a no-win story that's painting you out of the picture. Step number 3 is keep it simple. Find a source that gives you easy to understand, straightforward facts on real issues that are actually being considered in the halls of government. Everything else is noise and hearsay that you just simply don't have time for. Step number 4, write short, concise messages that clearly state your position on issues that you actually care about. Don't worry about the stuff that you're unsure of. Let somebody else handle that, right? Address it to the honorable so-and-so, honorable senator so-and-so or representative so-and-so. Now, if you don't believe they're actually honorable, maybe you can cast a vision for them. It certainly doesn't hurt to make your point civilly, okay? Step number 5, you're going to get a letter back from the office of your elected officials. Check to see if their actual voting record matches up with what they said they were going to do. And if they don't send you a letter back, respond to them again and say you expect it or you got to move them out of office. Step number 6 is find a trusted source to help you get good information without all the hype and spin. Now, there's some really good free services out there and paid services that help you with this step. One free service is called govtrack.us. Now, this site mostly focuses on federal issues, but it's easy to use. It gives you the contact information of your elected officials and allows you to research bills of interest. You can also go straight to official government sites like senate.gov or house.gov. You can get the contact information of your elected officials there. You can also get information on bills. Now, these official government sites can feel a bit overwhelming as they catalog all the proceedings of Congress. I also invite you to go to our website, FreedomSHIFT.com. You'll be able to access our free guide to effectively communicating with your elected officials there. It's filled with tips, a variety of places you can get information from. It gives some of the pros and cons of these sites. And we also offer a great resource at Freedom Shift as well to help simplify all of this for you. But before we get into that, Dan's going to share with you key number 3 on how to really protect our inherent rights.
Yes, Richard, it's about how to magnify our power and influence under the Constitution by being part of a grassroots movement that gets results. This is about strength in sufficient numbers. I'm not talking about everybody, sufficient numbers. And a movement has the lasting power to impact cultures and countries. It's not a fad that fades. For years, we've been slowly moving toward bigger government and less freedom, but a movement literally can cause a freedom shift sooner than you think. When America was merely a colony with limited rights under the King of Great Britain, less than 5% of the population said, give me liberty or give me death. Most were saying, let's wait in the bushes and see how this all works out. Thankfully, that 5% were all in, and they gave us the freedom we enjoy today and the model of a free society for the world to follow. In his book, Uprising, How to Change the World by Sparking a Cultural Movement, Scott Goodson talks about 4 critical keys to creating an irresistible movement. First of all, it starts with a big idea. And when that idea is combined with an ideal, it's even more powerful. You see, freedom is not just the big idea. It is the ideal that truly makes America great. The second key is provocation. All you have to do is look around and you realize that freedoms are under siege. Provocation is the traction for a movement to spread like wildfire. And right now, freedom-loving people all across the country are provoked. Maybe you can relate. The third key has to do with the practical side, tools and technology. Generally speaking, responsible Americans, I'm talking about the productive in society, are busy, but they care. People are already moved. We're simply turning that into a movement. Now, you don't have to march on Washington or your state capitals, because even if you did, that would be one and done. What we're talking about is responding on critical issues from the convenience and safety of your home or office, and in the process, be relentless about it. Freedom Shift is the answer to the questions. What can I do? How do I contact my elected officials? And how do I do so with impact? Now, let me give you an example of what happens when people are provoked and they show up. We all remember Obamacare. It was promoted with lies. You know, you can keep your doctor and you can keep your insurance company. It's going to be less expensive. And my favorite, we need to pass it to know what's really in it. I don't think so. Did anyone in their right mind think that if the government got more involved, it was going to be less expensive? They couldn't get the website to work for 6 months. Shortly after Obamacare was rolled out, the premiums were sky high. Healthcare started to cost more than ever. You see, the dirty little secret here is some politicians didn't care whether it worked or not, because this was about growing government, expanding their power. They actually ignored the American people in the process and pushed it through with backroom deals. Now, what were the consequences? The 2010 midterms were a disaster to those who voted for it, even incumbents. It was the largest turnover in the history of Congress. The fourth and most important element of building an unstoppable movement is passion. Again, this is about conviction, heart level belief. It is the it factor. The conviction that if we show up and we show up consistently, we're going to get results. Now, we're developing a whole community around this conviction. It's literally the engine of this movement. As I said, people are already moved. They're provoked. They see their freedoms are at stake. We're just connecting the dots. We're connecting the disconnected and mobilizing this community with conviction. conviction confirmed by results. President Reagan, in a speech, spoke about the heroism of Martin Treptow. And during World War I, he volunteered for an important mission in which he lost his life. Afterwards, his diary was found. He had written that America must win this war. He went on to say, "So I'll sacrifice, I'll endure, and I'll fight as if the whole of the struggle depended on me alone." Now, we're not asking anyone for this kind of sacrifice. But if we would do what we do as if freedom depended on us, we would unleash an unstoppable movement, and we would see a freedom shift in America.
Well, Dan, that's the kind of conviction that we're talking about, which is what we've been speaking about and promoting to audiences large and small for years, all three of us. I think you could tell that we're moved by the cause of freedom. And we know from experience that we can and must protect it. Now, let me give you one more very dramatic example as we wrap up here. This is how consistent effort makes all the difference. Now, a few years back, the EPA decided all on its own to dramatically expand its power without congressional approval. It declared that it had the power of administrative wage garnishment. What that meant is that they could fine a business or a property owner, and then without any court order, go straight into your bank account, start garnishing wages to satisfy that fine, just start to take the money out of your account. Now, effectively, they declared that they were judge, jury, and prosecutor all at once. I mean, a dangerous proposition for any branch of government. Now, the rules require them to publish any new regulation in the Federal Register. That's Federal Register. I'm sure that's something that everybody's familiar with, right? In fact, I found very few people who even know what the Federal Register is, let alone have read it or checked up on it from time to time. Now, so they had to publish it in the Federal Register. It has to stand for 30 days for public comment before it's effective. 15 days into this waiting period, out of a country of 3 million plus people, hardly anybody had spoken out in opposition against this. Well, 15 days into this waiting period, a research group that we've worked with caught it. They put out an alert to its mostly business owner members. And within 24 hours, those individuals responding to this alert by sending just a quick email to the EPA directly, kind of linked and made that easy for them to do that. Those statements immediately got the EPA's attention. Within 24 hours, they issued a statement that said, due to the receipt of adverse comments, the EPA is withdrawing the direct final rule for administrative wage garnishment. Think of it. A group of people had a service. They were poised to act. Within 24 hours, they'd sent in enough complaints direct to the EPA on this issue and shut the issue down. They walked away from it completely. They didn't want a flashlight, a light shine anymore on this issue. How many people? How many emails? Because again, it was a 24-hour period, so it was emails in this case. How many emails or calls did it take? Well, it was just under 900 before the EPA pulled the plug on that. Think of it. An organized effort stopped the erosion of our freedom. Those roughly 900 people, though, they had some help. They were some of the thousands of people who subscribed to a service designed to leverage the compound effect. Again, they didn't have time to read the Federal Register or the daily log of bills and actions before Congress, but they know it's important and it has an impact on them. So they simply used a resource that empowered them to take effective action in just a few minutes a week. And that is exactly our vision at FreedomSHIFT. It's to position you to do just that when a real threat to your freedom arises. Now, over the years, I've heard just about every excuse in the book for not getting involved. Like, I don't have time for this. I don't know anything about government. I'm not into politics. I'm only one person. I mean, didn't we elect Congress to do this for us? Isn't that why they have their job? And while these concerns have some validity on one level, we have to remember that this isn't about politics. It's about people with real world experience protecting our own interests and our freedom. It's about a duty to preserve our freedoms. Now, the reality is that elected officials, and I've met many of them, they often won a popularity contest. They didn't have to go through a rigorous test of credentials and interviewing and so on and so forth with people in an industry that know a lot about it. No, they got there because of some popularity. And They don't always have the best credentials to be running our country. They absolutely need your feedback. I mean, I have a letter from a congressman out of Iowa who said, after receiving just one letter from somebody back at home, he was made aware in that letter of a loophole in Medicare because it was that person's business. Now, he had no idea about this loophole, but he closed it in a bill, a subsequent bill, and it saved taxpayers millions of dollars every year. Now, that was just one letter, one person who took a time to make him aware of it. Again, what do you think the real world experience of even 10,000 responsible Americans could do for our country? Look, we get it. This can all seem very overwhelming. I mean, we didn't know what to do when we first got started in this journey either, but losing freedom on our watch wasn't an option. And these are unprecedented times, and we have to act now. And that's why Chris, Dan, and myself and others decided to call on our years of experience to come up with an innovative, easy to use solution to the real challenges that we the people have in protecting our freedoms. Remember, in our form of government, we the people still hold the power over every elected official. If you're the boss of somebody and you never check up on them, though, you have no power. It's no longer your company or your organization or entity. So that's true only if we supervise or oversee them or pay attention. And when we use the compound effect, we've got to leverage the compound effect, doing something simple on a regular basis. Just remember, think of the janitor and the spare change in the hallway and how that little bit compounded over time to make a big result for him. And then combine that with the strength of numbers. Think of the EPA issue. Not all issues can be won with just 900 people, but it does take a lot less than you might think to influence them on any given issue. If we don't use our power, though, we'll lose it. And one day, our children and their children will wonder what it was like to live in an America when people were free. Now, the truth is, by spending just a few minutes a week, and let me repeat that, just a few minutes a week, we can influence the government from the convenience of our own home and preserve freedom. And we're not kidding anyone here. I mean, we know we're in the battle of a lifetime. Freedom has always demanded a fight. It always will. But let me ask you a question. If you knew that there was a way to fight back against the media, big tech censorship, state and federal government overreach in our daily lives, would you be willing to stand with us? Well, that's the question we're asking you today. The fact that you've come this far with us says a lot about you. Clearly, you know what we're up against. And we hope that the information that we presented here today gives you a clearer vision of what works, what doesn't, and most importantly, we hope it inspired you to take action and do your part. With that said, however, we've all been here before. Let's face it. We've been excited about something new, a little bit of information, been inspired. And then tomorrow's reality hits like a ton of bricks. I mean, I actually like physical activity, but I've missed more fitness goals than I care to admit. And don't even get me started on some of the financial goals I've set over the years. I've found, though, that when I use coaching or a tool, either through an app or a person or a book, I often hit my goal. So we want to offer you a convenient solution to help you really stick with this critical responsibility to really protect our freedom and simplify the process and amplify your voice at the same time. Now, if you'd like our help, stick around for just a few more minutes to learn about our FreedomSHIFT service that can put any concerned American in the driver's seat to really protect our God-given rights under the Constitution. And remember to do that in as little time as possible. And the best part is you'll also be supporting the cause to grow this into a relentless movement of freedom-loving people standing in defense of our Constitution. Okay, procrastination, I should say, is the key to making sure that things never get done. So let's jump right into this. Let's wrap this thing up with meaningful action right now. Thomas Jefferson said, "The only sure way to preserve our liberties is in the hands of the people themselves." We believe in the free market and that this service should be free from any big money influence. And so I'm going to say this right now. If this effort isn't funded by you, it's not happening. At the same time, don't worry, we've literally made this affordable for anyone. This self-funding requires us to also be accountable to you and to the principles of freedom that we all agree on. So it's the right way to do this. And our commitment is to make this easy and effective for you and reinvest the funds into growing a relentless movement of like-minded, freedom-loving people to stand together to protect our Constitution. And here's how it breaks down. As a member, you'll receive a weekly communication designed to keep you informed, engaged, motivated, and effective. So by subscribing to our FreedomSHIFT report as a member, you'll receive one simple communication each week. The first week will be a freedom alert. This is designed to make you aware of a threat to our freedom that's happening right then, and then it's giving you a voice to help stop it. This alert provides a concise background on the issue, gives a for and against statement, and then a brief constitutional perspective on the issue with a link of how to get this off to your elected officials. In week 2, you'll receive a freedom fundamental. This is designed to teach a powerful freedom principle through story so that you can be up to speed on what we need to be keeping our eye on to really preserve freedom in our society. In week 3, this is a freedom amp up. These are going to give you real world examples of how involvement made the difference. This will give you the belief that you need that our efforts are working, that they're actually making a difference, and that they have made a difference. In week 4 is a podcast, often an interview with a guest who's in the freedom fight right now, or will be kind of covering a current event in that. You're also going to receive access to other resources on our website, and you'll be helping us with financial support to finalize an app that's underway that will further simplify this process for you. The subscription is $149.95 a year, which breaks down to $12.50 a month. And again, we use these funds to provide the service and grow the movement. We do extend an annual membership incentive of $89.95. And here's why. First, we want to recognize you for making a longer-term commitment. Again, going back to Jefferson, he said the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. So you should have incentive to make the longer-term commitment. And second, this allows us to grow the movement faster with more revenue right up front. Hey, if you prefer a month-to-month approach, no problem. Take it. Let us earn your trust. Now, for those of you who want to help us grow this even faster, you've been moved today and you really recognize the threats that are out there. We have our most popular plan called the Patriot membership. Now, like our standard membership, you'll receive the Freedom Alert, the Freedom Fundamental, Freedom Amp Up, the podcast. You'll also have access to other resources on the website. You'll be helping us with financial support to finalize that app that I mentioned before. And that's going to make it just that much more effective and easy for you to use. You'll also be helping grow the movement faster. It takes money to get the message out there, to get it in front of more people. You'll also on there receive a digital copy of the FreedomSHIFT Effect book. There'll be an opportunity as well as a Patriot member to gift a membership to another person so that they can get all of these resources as well. All you do is send us their email when you sign up or their information. We only will use that for providing the service. We won't use that for any other reason. Now, the annual subscription price for the Patriot level is $199.95, or the monthly option is $19.95. Well, finally, we are offering an affiliate Patriot membership. This gives you everything in the Patriot level, plus a chance to receive commission for helping grow the movement. We look at it this way. We can either pay, big advertising dollars, or we can invest it in patriots like you who help spread the word. Simply sign up for the Patriot membership and then email us that you'd like the details of our affiliate program. We'll get them out right away to you and set up your own affiliate links. Look, it's easy to put this off. It's easy to say, I'll do this another day. Let me think about it. I got a process. But today is the day. Now's the time to stand up to the threats for freedom. What are we going to do differently if we don't act now? Now, if you're not ready to make an annual subscription, well, then just take this month by month. Like I said before, let us earn your trust. After all, what are you really risking? The equivalent of dining out for one meal for one person? I mean, I've seen us blow that on subpar food all the time. So consider what's at stake here. Think of the Washington elites, the political games being played with our freedom. Think of our financial future, our family's future, and make it a priority to start doing something about it today. You do that by becoming a Freedom Shifter and getting a Freedom Shift membership. Jefferson knew something about tyranny. He knew about the tyranny of governments when he said, and again I quote, "Freedom is only sure in the hands of the people themselves." It's time to get off the sidelines. It's time to take this country back. Start by becoming a freedom shifter today. Thank you for spending this time with us, and welcome to the movement.